Welcome to Revive Ministries Podcast. Today we are starting a new monthly theme, finding our refuge in recovery. Finding a safe place is, I would say, maybe overuse that phrase, but doesn't discount the need of it. You know, a lot of it's at the core of finding that space to find that healing and ask the question, what's next? Now, finding a safe place, it really is individualized to the individual himself. Everyone's very different. The context is different. Today, we have a returning guest, no strangers to the podcast. Welcome, Sebastian. Thank you for joining us today, returning, being part of the discussion.
Yeah, thank you for having me, man. Always a blessing to be here and talking with you.
Like I always begin, I always have a disclaimer for those who are around the world and U.S. It's 1-800-273-8255 is National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. But we're just going to go right into it. I know people say things better than I do. Alice Walker says it this way. The most common way people give up their power is by thinking they don't have any. What comes to mind when you hear this quote?
The most common way people give up their power is by thinking they don't have any. Yeah, I think, in many of our conversations that we've had, and conversations that you've had in my podcast, as we've taken turns, just the power of choice and the power of making that first decision. And when you take that idea of freedom of choice, people feel enslaved, right? Long story short, there's a couple of shows on Netflix that have recently come out, kind of documentaries on situations like this. Especially, there's one that came out yesterday. That I finished yesterday, called Puppet Master, and all it does is it's a man that lies a lot, and he gets these vulnerable women to believe his lies, and he alienates them, and kind of to the point where he doesn't allow. He takes that idea that they have freedom to choose and to get out away from their mind, so they think that they have no choice. They do have a choice to get out and leave, but he's so lied to them and put them in this cycle. And it's powerful to see how the family's talking about their moms or friends or daughters that are in this situation, how powerless they feel, and even the women later when they do come out, how powerless they felt in that moment. And so I think, it's so easy to give up your power and your reasoning to know that you can make choices and move on in life and get away or come out of a bad situation when you think that there's no other choice or you're trapped in there, right? And it's sad to see people trapped like that when they don't realize that, hey, you have choices and you can get out. Obviously, it's not, every situation is different, but at least in this TV show, in this documentary that they were showing, just the women, how they were lied to, and their minds just believed that they became these characters that the man portrayed them to be. And so they felt that they had no power to leave or no ability to choose, even though they could, right? So it was a powerful reality of that in real life form.
Yeah, it's interesting because what stood out to me was just the word fear and uncertainty. A lot of it, not all cases, like you said, every context is different, but a lot of it starts out there. I remember this one quote, I'm going to paraphrase it. No one will respect your time if you don't respect it yourself, kind of thing. So
it's true.
At the same time, there's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of fear. If you're consumed by it, unfortunately, you could fall victim to this. That you know what, I don't have any power. Please help me. And the thing is, the certainty that a lot of things are provided in the world can be dangerous. And unfortunately, in the show that you mentioned, it is that case. But when we think about refuge, we kind of look at like a physical, like a tent or like or something where it provides shelter. But there's many illustrations and kind of ways to look at what our refuge would be, whether you're faith-based or not. There's the idea of finding that safe kind of place where you can process things. And sometimes it's just a space where you just have time to just be. So, I don't know, what have your, when you think about refuge, I know you've been through a lot last few years. What has helped you, like, find it? Because a lot of times it's hard to find it.
Yeah, I think, yeah, it's two things I think that come off right away is seeking help, right? Whether I did some counseling when I lost my dad, and then just having conversations with other people who have gone through that and experienced similar, having conversations to see how they dealt with it and different tools and tips that they can give me, and at the same time then seeing what works for me. Not the same thing works for everyone. And so I think that's what I think of Refuge, right? That we all have something that we can run to, a place, a hobby, a person, a location, an idea, where we can find that refuge and that hope and that place to find peace away from everything that's going on. But many times it takes having a conversation with someone to really trigger it and say, okay, where do I feel? Maybe I'm at the beach, or maybe when I'm just alone with a book reading, right, listening to music on the car. So then you find out what your refuge is, and maybe you can have many of them, right, multiple ones. And so I have different ones that I find that I can kind of recenter and hone in again, and just take a deep soul breath, right, not just normal breathing, but really like getting taking a day off, being intentional about taking a break, spending time with family, if you need to get away and just be by yourself, being intentional, set that time. And I think the third point would be guarding that time, right? Making boundaries, making it a priority, communicating it to those around you, whether at work, at school, at play, at home, and saying, hey, this is, I'm gonna need an hour to just for myself, not because I'm angry or because I'm upset. I just need an hour to find refuge and to just take a moment for myself.
It's a lot of times, when I'm, I work in the mental health field, and what I've noticed is I ask a simple question: what's your favorite hobby? And it's hard to answer, because it's like, well, what do you mean? I have all these problems. Why would I have time for a hobby? And like, there's kind of this value, like, well, I need to get this stuff done first for me to even deserve a hobby. And this is where it kind of gets tricky, and kind of where the refuge kind of dissipates in a way, because you don't, unless you get these things done. And there's this one word I'm gonna butcher how to say, vacilando, Spanish. It's in a lot of different cultures in Latin America. They have different ways of translating this. But I like kind of saying, it's like, for me, it's like during COVID, me and my wife we're just cooped up. So I'm just like, you know what? Let's just go in the car and let's just drive. Where? I don't know. Just drive it. We're just gonna go around. Like, throw the map away, throw the GPS away. I don't care what destination I'm going to.
I don't care.
Going. But I think it's kind of very freeing when we allow ourselves these moments, because every day cannot be a crisis. Everything other, and making to that point, we're talking about boundaries, like you prompted, but also the idea that we deserve nice things. We're allowed to have fun. We're allowed to, if we make mistakes, accountability only becomes a bad word when we don't provide ourselves a safe place. When we're so afraid of being wrong because that's attached to who we are, our value, our identity. When you think of all these concepts, what speaks out to you? I know it's a lot jumbled together, but refuge covers a lot.
Yeah, and I love that idea of hobbies. I don't know if triggered is the correct word to say in this time, but it catapulted me to another idea. I heard a talk by Brene Brown called Power of Vulnerability, and she talks about vulnerability and shame and guilt and all that. But one of the conversations she had was on play and rest. And so it was very, very cool to see it. And I was trying to look it up. And so she says that play is at the core of creativity and innovation. And that can mean, as you said, hobbies, right? Snorkeling, scrapbooking, solving crossword puzzles. For me, it's mountain biking or working out, playing any sport, sitting down and watching a Netflix show. Cooking for some people is therapeutic. It's anything that makes us lose track of time and self-consciousness, creating the clearing where ideas are born, right? So obviously here it's in the context of, hey, this is where you can find a lot of creativity. For me, sometimes just doing random stuff like that, I get a lot of sermon ideas, right, from normal object lessons type of thing, because I'm a pastor. But I do love the point that she makes, that because of where we live and in the type of culture and society where it's very dominant by work, we don't many times make space for play, right? Just like we don't make space for refuge because we don't have time for that. And then it feels like a waste of time if I'm not doing something productive, right? So I think there's value in taking moments where maybe you're not, you know, reaching for a goal, you know, and maybe there is, maybe some hobbies like working out, you do have a goal, you want to max, you want to do a certain amount of reps or carry a certain amount of weight, you know, when you're bench pressing or doing squats or whatever. But in other things, you know, crossword puzzle, there's an end goal in sight, but you're doing something that's just out of the ordinary, you know, something to get your mind off it, not to really do it because your performance isn't, you know, you're not valued by how you perform in doing your crossword puzzle, but you're just doing something to play. And I think that's so important. It's not really, I mean, obviously people say it's important, but most times, you know, in the underlying tones of society, we're kind of like, no, if it's not being productive to your work or something to bettering yourself, then why are you wasting time? And really, it's not wasted time. It's valuable time, right? So that I think goes along with refuge and playing and just taking time where you're not really trying to accomplish anything. I'm just out here riding a trail. I'm just out here snorkeling. Not really trying to, you know, improve. I'm just here. And I think we don't do that enough. And that's why we have so much, I don't know, so many issues that come from not playing and not resting.
I like you mentioned innovation. For me, I feel creativity lies in that kind of line, that kind of of innovation. And one story I remember listening to someone speak. I forgot who he was, but he said just about, you know, just reflecting on why you look the position you're in. This one guy cooked. He's like, why do you like cooking? And asking why. Eventually he came to the conclusion he likes cooking because he likes bringing people together. And, so the cooking was his vessel, his vehicle to do that. So I think innovation, a lot of times, like, we're saturated with information out there, almost so much out there. So what makes us stand out is who we are. If we forget who we are, it's kind of like innovation doesn't, we kind of try to overlap and try to better, and this urgency, this hustle, and it can lead to bitterness, unfortunately, because you don't see progress like you like to see. You don't see things happen like you like to see. And sometimes when it rains and it pours and you don't allow yourself time to enjoy life, it becomes very rigid and cold and calculated, and you may see someone maybe not appreciating something that you think they should appreciate. It becomes more of a, how you say, an elevated experience that you become prone to anxiety, and you may get tense. And these types of moments, unfortunately, sometimes we make some impulsive decisions about what we're going to do. It could be as small as me saying a remark to someone just impulsively because I was just hurt, or it could be something just kind of slow and maybe not seen, that maybe seen by around your close friends is like, you know what, I'm not going to go to church today. I'm not going to go to do what I'm doing because, you know, I you know, people don't really notice me or something like that. You kind of go through this. And you kind of, with that, you're avoiding. And avoidance is an action, even though you might not.
It feels like inaction, but it is action. That's good. That's good.
There's this word I'm not even gonna try. There's one person, one of my guests. Yeah, it's Ostrich Politics. It says acting like you don't notice when something bad happens and continuing on regardless as you normally would. So it's a long word of like putting your head in the sand, but in regards to recovery and your own healing, you know, sometimes we kind of, you know, it gets some of the most hard things in our lives. I remember this one church lady. I still remember. She said, people are either blessings or lessons. Some of the innovation and the conversation you have, maybe the most combative ones, but then you learn something about yourself. You would have never been prompted if you didn't have that experience. You know, it's not that we ideally run towards uncomfortability, but we do tend to latch onto it because of uncertainty. because and it can actually stunt the healing that may be ahead of us. What is the when we think about this, and obviously go back to the quote, what is the danger do you feel if we continue to get complacent in our approach, as the word suggests, on our own healing and recovery? When we look at this humongous word, but it's really just saying, I'm going to avoid it. I'm just going to pretend it's not happening. There's moments when we can't handle everything at once. That's different. Everything can't be handled in one day, but it's a clear action to not address it at all. So what have you noted? What would you want to say?
I think the longer I'm alive, the more I realize that we are just big kids that haven't really learned how to manage, and it depends obviously on how healthy our family systems were when we were growing up and what we experienced, right? The traumas, all that we've experienced as kids. And I look around, and working with kids, I see just adults doing kid stuff, but as big kids, right? We're just big kids trying to navigate. And so I just think of a kid, right, that doesn't know how to fix their problems, and they just want to cry, right? And so it's just the parents working to, okay, what did you lost your thing? I can't find it. Well, let's go look for it, right? Let's look for solutions. And many times we're just kind of like that kid where we lose it and we're like, well, it's gone. I don't know how, and when we don't really take the time to really do that deep, hard work of looking at what's going on, what is triggering these emotions, why am I feeling this way, right? Why, when I think about the gym, do I get lazy and actually go eat instead, or why, whatever it is, right, that we're wrestling with. It is hard work to work with our emotional health and to dig into those painful memories and the grieving and the losses that we've gone through. But it is valuable work, right? I think many times we do act like kids running around without knowing, I don't know, we're just going from one thing to another and just reacting rather than being in control of the situations as much as possible and processing what's going on and then making a approach like that. So I think it's interesting when we don't take time for our emotional health, when we don't take time for recovery, for rest, for play, as we're talking about. I think it stunts our healing and growth and our recovery. I mean, we can come to a place where we feel recovery, but it's really not a healthy place. And we probably won't be healed, right? We probably won't come to this moment of healing. I'm very interested in, obviously I'm a pastor, so I'm going to throw in some faith things, but even when Jesus was walking on earth, there was never a moment where he negated or did away with the actual physical stuff that people were going through, right? It was as if he came into their moment. He humanized their situation. He saw what they were going through. He touched them when they felt untouchable. He heard them. He saw them. He made them feel loved in their situation. And I think sometimes when we're trying to put our best foot forward, whether on social media, when we go show up to work, we want to feel like everything's set up and nothing's going on at home. When we're not real about what's going on, it's hard for ourselves to be real with ourselves because we're lying to everyone else, and then healing doesn't come, right? So the people that came to Jesus to be healed, they had to be real with their situations, and those that weren't real with Jesus didn't receive a healing many times. He was really saying, hey, you're missing out. And the Bible tells us that there was, when Jesus would come around, entire towns were healed, but there were also towns that weren't, and people that weren't, because they were proud and said, we don't need your help and we don't need your healing. So I think in all this, it's just a conversation again to be okay with not being okay, and being okay with this being a process, that we're not going to wake up tomorrow and feel perfect. We may feel better tomorrow than we do today, but it is a process. And until we take time to uncover the deep work and really dig deep into it, we won't find the healing that we're looking for and desiring for our lives.
Yeah, and I like that, when we have this refuge, we're able to actually be, see ourselves as valuable, as valued. And it's not measured by any arbitrary, it's just that I know I have this goal in mind, but I have value in myself that I need to maybe set boundaries or set time for me to reflect on this. Set time for me to say, hey, I'm not very good at this, but does that define who I am as a person, as a person with my family? I remember in church when I was started. I just remember a lot of people were just more concerned of who was doing what in the pews, like who was contributing enough. I'm not even talking about tithes. I'm talking about actions in the church. And I used to kind of tell people that I was talking to them as a leader, I said, don't focus on that. Just focus forward. Don't worry about that. When you value yourself, it doesn't matter what other people do. What matters is where you're headed. And that's where vacilando, it's not, and also not heading alone. Life is best lived shared. And when we stop lying to ourselves that our friendships, our relationships with our spouse do matter, then you can actually have a real conversation. It's not like it doesn't matter. It does matter. And this Yasmin Mogahed had this great kind of quote, kind of insightful. It says, resilience is very different than being numb. Resilience means you experience, you feel, you fail, you hurt, you fall, but you keep going. So
that's good.
It's not like I'm just get a cheat code and I just go through. No, I go through all this. So that means, I'm gonna make mistakes at times, and that also means. But as you proceed and you realize that this is for me, and you value yourself, it just kind of makes the whole getting things wrong not such a big deal. You just kind of say, okay, that didn't work. How can I make this different? You mentioned the little boy who was crying or whatever. At least he was asking for help. Some people don't. Right. They just go away and pretend everything's great. There's this word, I just threw it in there. I don't know. Can you say this? Do you know how to say this word?
I don't know. Maybe comuvere. I don't know how. I don't know. I'm not sure what the Italian.
Well, yeah, and
I need to brush up on my Italian. It's been a while.
But a lot of times, we think of stories, heartwarming stories, and a lot of our lives are stories. Usually, stories are moved to tears, and they're not always because they're sad. Sometimes it's the growth and where you saw yourself and where you are today, and sometimes having a refuge or building on that refuge is can be the first steps towards that. I just want to ask you, with the title as we wrap up, what does this topic mean to you personally, and why do you feel it's important today, and what have you seen, what do you want to share regarding the title?
Yeah, man, finding our refuge in recovery. The first thing that just comes to mind is being okay with the process, right? Being okay with not being okay, which I know is one of your many slogans that you got. But finding that you can be okay in the midst of the storm, right? Again, there's a story in the Bible where Jesus is sleeping in the boat, and his disciples are in the sea, and they're getting battered by the wind. The rain is falling. That some of them are experienced fishermen, but they've never seen anything like that. And they forget that Jesus is on the boat. They try to fight it on their own. Then they realize, let's go wake up Jesus. He's here all along, and he has some supernatural power. He wakes up and just calms the storm. And then he just questions their faith and say, why did you guys doubt? Why do you have such little faith? And I think it's an important lesson there where many of us don't like that, to go through the storm or through the hard times, right? We look at other people, and this is one of the downfalls of social media, where everyone else's life looks to be perfect and no problems. Oh, their family looks great. Oh, his work is amazing. He just got a promotion, right? Oh, his kids are well behaved, and they can actually have kids. So look, they're not feeling they don't feel depressed today. Their mood feels great. They're always happy, it seems. But if you were able to pierce behind the screens, you'd be able to see that they're really not too different from you. Rich or poor, young and old, we're all facing the challenges of life and all that we're going through. And I think the sooner we're okay with our own journey and trying to find refuge in recovery and saying, hey, I'm in a journey of recovery, I'm growing, it takes time, but I'm working on it one day at a time. I think the closer we get to being revived, right? Like your ministry is coming back to life and feeling like, hey, my life has a purpose. I'm not the worst here. My life has been I've gone through different things in my life, but I'm okay, and I'm going to keep pressing on. And I think practicing the things that you shared throughout these podcasts and the conversations are great ways to do that. But the first thing is that you have to be real with yourself. And it's like going to the doctor, right? If you go to the doctor and, you know, you're told to go and you don't want to, but you've been having these pains maybe in your chest, it's hard for you to breathe, you know, your hand hurts, you've been feeling numbness and tingly, you get to the doctor, and unless you're real with them, they can't help you. The doctor can give some x-rays, they may be able to see if there's some broken, you know, bones or maybe some fluid, whatever it is, but unless you tell them, hey, I've been having shortness of breath, I'm feeling numbness and tingly, my heart's been hurting, you know, they're not going to be able to help you. And so as we go to, you know, the doctors, and anytime when we need help in that way, we have to be real about our conditions, and that's the only way we can find healing. In the same way in our emotional health, we need to stop lying to ourselves and say, hey, I'm hurting, this is hard, you know, I'm still processing, you know, I just, this is, and I'll wrap this and I'll pass it back to you, but I was just in Buffalo for one of my best friends. He had me lead out a memorial service for his baby that was born premature and passed away. He was only alive for a couple of hours outside the womb, and it was very sad, tragic. You know, this is their third boy, and so they're devastated, obviously. And so we went up, and in there I was able to share some words of just comfort and trying to just encourage them to continue to hold on to Jesus and to hope for that day where they'll be reunited with their baby boy. And in the audience, unbeknownst to me, was a lady that had lost her son about 25 years ago, right? And so Michelle, which is my friend's wife, said that you know, a week or two before, they had communicated, and because Michelle and Edgar were so open about their pain and their journey through this, about losing their baby boy, this lady said that now she felt comfortable in this realm and in this setting to express her pain and to not neglect it as she had been doing for the last 25 years. So she said it was the first time in 20 years that she took out a picture of that boy that she lost 25 years ago and put it somewhere. Like, she was hiding all these things so that she wouldn't have to experience the pain, but in so doing, she was holding it in her. Even though she wasn't thinking about it, her body was just holding on to it, and she wasn't healing or recovering because she was neglecting it. And so she mentioned afterwards that she felt really free again, because she's still in pain, she's still mourning, but now she felt that she could mourn, and that her recovery and their journey was okay because someone else shared their story of their pain. And so that's, I think, hopefully the desire for us, right, to be okay with sharing, because you never know how in sharing your story and how you can find refuge in recovery in your journey, you can impact others to do the same thing.
Yeah. And I like when I was making this the theme, I like just the first word being an action. We're seeking, finding a refuge. It's very touching story what you just shared, but also it's a reminder that we're all kind of interconnected. We can pretend we're islands, we can pretend we're stoic, we can pretend we're machista, but at the same time, we need each other as much as we may say we don't. And I feel finding that refuge will make, you know, like you said, inadvertently, your message, the tragedy that your friend's experience was able to shed light on someone else's tragedy years ago. So I feel, you know, that's the kind of, even I found, even in support groups, what I've seen is that nothing tangible on paper changes, but something does inside. You allow yourself the refuge, the time to experience and to kind of take those first steps towards healing. I just want to say thank you, Sebastian.
Thank you.
And I just want to share with those who are listening, watching, and remember to stay updated with Revive Ministries through the various platforms, ReviveMinistriesFL.com. This is goodbye from Revive Ministries. Leaving you this last quote from Mahatma Gandhi. It says, "Every worthy act is difficult. Ascent is always difficult. Descent is easy and often slippery."
That's good. Yeah.